Hello and welcome, Ryan Willard here, architect from the Thinking Hand studio, and today I am in one of my favourite parts of town, Wapping, the jewel, I like to think, of Tower Hamlets. And today what I want to talk about is conservation areas, and a lot of the projects that I end up working on in the Thinking Hand studio, TTHS Architects, are in conservation areas. Lots of people live in them in London, lots of people live in them in London and aren't aware of them, but generally if you're living in a part of town which has got a kind of distinct architectural character, a kind of historic flavour might be the easiest way to describe it, that you're probably in a conservation area. Areas of outstanding natural beauty can often also fall in conservation areas. And what this means is it's not impossible to get planning, it just means that there are certain additional regulations and a certain amount of extra care and attention that the planning department will be looking at when you submit your applications, particularly if you're doing work to the frontage of your building. So for example, lots of conservation areas, we recently just doing a planning permission in Hampstead where the project was not allowed to have double glazing in the front of the windows because the double glazed glass would have a very different reflectivity, and in the planning policy would deem to be impactful, particularly to the listed buildings that are in the surrounding areas, that would kind of detract and denigrate the overall architectural quality of these conservation areas. So I'm here in Wapping, and I think Wapping is a really amazing example of what a conservation area is and what the kind of things people look for in conservation areas. So when you walk around Wapping, it's very clear that there is a distinct overarching material that is used everywhere, and that is the brick. If you walk down the streets, they've got beautiful cobbled streets. All the old industrial warehouses that front onto the River Thames are all brick. There's fantastic London stock brick. You've got Brick Lane only a few hundred meters away, well probably a little bit, maybe half a kilometre away. Would have been a centre of brick production. Where I'm standing right now is a old Victorian, Georgian, Dickensian-esque cemetery, and again it's got these beautiful high brick walls that's kind of creating this sanctuary, a very peaceful sanctuary in amongst these old conservation buildings. So the brick is a material, lead roofs is another feature that you're going to see a lot around here. So this kind of material palette, you're not really going to be able to veer far off that if you're going to be building anything here. So that might even be a new build, or it might be an extension to an existing property. I think a lot of the property around here tends to be in apartments or they're refurbishments of old warehouses, but I'll talk a little bit about in a minute, there's a fantastic extension around the corner there which has been done in beautiful dark black bricks. They've kind of done a very understated design. They've kind of copied some of the kind of existing architectural features that are prevalent in some of the older houses on the riverfront. There's kind of round corners that you get, and they've kind of utilised that kind of architectural form and repeated it, kind of still using the same architectural language that makes up what defines this part of town as something architecturally interesting and a character which is worth preserving, hence why it is a conservation area. The other thing that planners tend to look out a lot, so materials, that's the first thing, right? You're going to do an extension, you're going to do any work, either you're keeping in exact the same material palette, or sometimes, I've done this a lot with particularly working with listed buildings, is we've gone for a totally different material palette, but something which is sympathetic and very delineates itself clearly from the existing buildings. So for example, we're working on a monastery up in Northumberland at the moment, and the traditional materials of the existing buildings, 300-year-old agricultural houses, you know, old stone, brick, you know, kind of heavy earthy materials. And we've done a very lightweight glass, aluminium frame structure, and it's very clear what's new and it's very clear what's old, and the planners very much like that as a strategy. So there are kind of two sorts of approaches that you can really go for. And the other thing is roof lines. So typically, again, this is important when you're working with the frontage of buildings. If you're looking at doing roof extensions, or you're trying to alter the height of buildings, roof lines are very, very characteristic of certain areas, and by interrupting continuous roof lines, you're kind of changing the streetscape. It has a big impact. So planners don't like things that kind of jump up and down and disturb roof lines or roofscapes that are already very prominent and very well defined. So that's another thing that planners often look for. So every time you approach a conservation area, I always suggest work with an architect who understands that local area, who's perhaps done some projects there already, or somebody who is very sensitive and sympathetic to working with areas of historic and architectural interest, and it will really help and enhance your project. And if you're seeking to serve and have that as part of your own brief to enhance the local area, it becomes something to celebrate and something to really have a bit of fun with, and all the different ways that you can approach being in a conservation area. So I hope that's useful, and I hope you enjoy all the beautiful images of Wapping.